Hey everyone, Zoe here. On today's episode of Survival Mistakes, I want to look at the lessons learned from. Now, if you've never seen a lessons learned from video from me, it's raised the question, if something was our one example, one piece of media was our only reference point, what survival skills or survival lessons could we learn from it? And in this case, I'm going to be looking at the Black Mirror episode, Metalhead. So Black Mirror is a sci-fi anthology series by Charlie Brooker. Although the episodes are largely independent of each other, the common theme throughout is the invasiveness of modern technology and where that might lead us to in the future. And Metalhead was dropped onto the Netflix streaming service as part of Season 4 on December 29th, 2017. Now, consider this your spoiler warning. I'm about to spoil the entire plot of this episode for you. You ready for it? A woman attempts to survive against a quadruped, AI-controlled military robot. That's the whole plot. And if you're thinking that sounds like Terminator, then you're probably not too wrong. So, the episode has quite a diverse reaction among fans. A lot of people really like it, a lot of people really hate it. Me personally, I like it because I like survival stories. My ex-boyfriend, on the other hand, thought it was the most boring episode of Black Mirror he's ever seen and fell asleep during it. So most people, the thing that stands out is the fact that the episode is the shortest episode of Black Mirror, at the time of filming this anyway, and it's filmed entirely in black and white, which was a decision by the director David Slade as a tribute to old black and white horror films like Night of the Living Dead. The episode has an exceptionally small cast, so much so that I can actually mention them all in this video in about under a minute. Our main character Belle is played by Maxine Peake, we've got Anthony, played by Clint Dyer, and Clark, played by Jake Davies. And we also get Graham, Ali and Jack as other characters that are mentioned but not actually witnessed on screen. So, now I've done the introduction, let's sit down together and watch Metalhead and look at the lessons learned from. So the first line of dialogue is Bella opening a humbug and making a passing reference to the scarcity of food.
Open one of those for us.
No, you're the only one who can stand these things.
Well, the one thing's left.
Now, for those of you that don't know what a humbug is, it's one of these. It's a small, hard-boiled sweet which contains sugar, glycerin, and usually peppermint oil as flavourings. So, how on earth can I derive a survival skill from a humbug, you might ask? Well, obviously in the episode we see what Bella uses them for, and we come into that in a bit, but I read the ingredients of one of these, and I think I can get a survival skill from a humbug that only requires one other item. As if by the magic of video editing and the internet, this is potassium permanganate. This is the other ingredient to creating a fire from a humbug, because this causes a chemical reaction with the glycerol that's in a humbug, and the catalyst for that reaction is actually the saliva, and well, technically the moisture in human saliva. Adding this together with the glycerol from the humbug and moisture can create an endothermic reaction, which I'm hoping will be able to light some tinder. Now, I imagine you guys are probably going to want to see what this looks like on camera, so let's see if I can get some out. So that's what it looks like. It's basically just a very, very fine powder. So, back to the episode. So our cast arrives at the warehouse, and we, the audience, are given a little bit of priming for the twist ending.
This is mental, this is. I mean, he's dying anyway. Well, he is. You know, it's not like it's going to save him. He's got, what, days?
Because Black Mirror episodes usually contain a twist ending, similar to other anthology shows like The Twilight Zone, The Outer Limits, or Tales from the Crypt. Bella also mentions the possibility of scavenging for other resources, such as batteries.
Plus, there'll be other stuff in there. Batteries. All sorts.
Okay.
When it comes to resources, I really want to talk about the kit that our characters have. I really, really like how Clark has an emergency glass hammer from his sling bag. Now, glass hammers aren't something you see particularly often. There's not many depictions of them that I can think of off the top of my head. So I just really nice to see them in a rare media depiction. Although, if you are going to carry a glass hammer as a method of entry or exit, you've really got to test it. You do get what you pay for. I've seen cheap glass hammers break on car windows. And I've seen expensive ones actually rescue a child that was trapped in the back of a rental car. Keys were locked in the car, and the spare keys were about 4 hours in a different direction. So breaking the window, because of the heat, was the best solution. That's my lesson when it comes to glass hammers. If you're going to have one, get down the junkyard, test it. If you're going to test your kit in a safe, controlled environment, you know you can rely on it in an emergency. You don't want to be in that cliche situation where you're upside down in your vehicle, reaching for the glass hammer for it to do nothing. And Anthony also carries his own method of access and entry. It's a crowbar that he pulls from his sling bag. I've no comment on crowbars, I just like to see the fact he's got one as part of his kit. Looking at the characters, I really like how Bella, Tony and Clark are clearly wearing layers. And in the case of Clark, you actually see that he's actually repaired his clothing. So there's signs of wear and tear, and that's another important skill we can take away from this brief glance at his shoulder. That learning how to repair and maintain your equipment, because that's all you've got, is a really important survival lesson. I'm largely going to gloss over Clark's hacking kit, because apart from the Raspberry Pi board, it's largely fictional. But what I really like to see is that he's got a paper referencing tool. Now, a lot of people look down on you if you're having reference tools, you know, guides in your bug out bag or kits on a bookshelf. I really like reference tools, and I'm not going to be one of those people that looks down on people that have the need to look up stuff, because the correct recall of survival facts and information is absolutely critical. If you're trying to memorize everything and you get something wrong, well, that miscalculation could be fatal. So I just really like the fact that although we're talking about hacking, the lesson we can take away from this is that, you know, they've got reference tools, and aid memoirs and reference tools are something I really am a strong advocate for. As Bella and Anthony go into the warehouse, we also see they've both got flashlights as part of their toolkits. Now here on Survive Mistakes, I've already gone into why I love flashlights and my own personal experience for why they became a crucial part of my kits. Roll the clip.
A few years ago, I did a zombie survival airsoft event. It was in a disused building that was 2 stories high, and there were 3 separate teams, and we had to go around and do objectives where there were actors or stooges and avoid zombies. We had a group of 10 people, and between those 10 people we had 2 flashlights. If you were not one of the people with a flashlight, you could not see anything. I fell over crates, pallets, tripped over doorsteps, and basically the people with the flashlights, they were gods. Flashlights, exceptionally important to prevent mechanical injury.
So now we're just introduced to our antagonist of the episode, the dog. And it's already made a strong opening statement in the amount of screen time it's already had. It's already shown capabilities to navigate difficult terrain, unlike some other fictional robots. It can pursue and catch up to a van moving across rough gravelly terrain, and it's got a short-range projectile weapon, along with the ability to do scatter grenades that are loaded with trackers. The dog is a very, very scary fictional robot, although its actual design is based on a couple of different designs from Boston Dynamics for their AI-controlled robots. And as the dog catches up to Clark in the van, we can unfortunately see that that weapon it's got integrated into it isn't single shot. Now one could argue, in some capacity, Belle's survival is linked to vehicles. Because in this short chase sequence, she's already stopped the dog getting in an advantageous position by overtaking her, avoided being rammed off the road several times, and also avoided what I would consider to be a pit manoeuvre. She's also stopped herself going off a cliff, and also actually woken up following a very, very nasty looking head trauma. She shields herself from the dog's weapon with her backpack. No real survival skill here, I just like it, it's a rare depiction. I can only think of maybe the Hunger Games, where someone shielded themselves with a backpack, and maybe I'll be making a reference to the Hunger Games in this video again. And also, before she leaves the vehicle, Belle's Luck manages to engineer an accidental chain of events that leads to her escaping the vehicle, and also injuring the dog, taking its primary weapon offline and inoperable, and also on some level affecting its mobility. You could argue that Belle's Luck only really runs out the next time she tries to get into a vehicle, which is later in the episode. Another lesson we can witness in this episode is that Belle carries first aid supplies on her. Although we could argue that the TCP is ultimately useless because the bottle's broken, TCP disinfectant is actually really useful for wound management. And as I've already demonstrated on survival mistakes in the past, surgical spirit, such as that, is also really flammable, which makes another great dual-purpose survival tool to consider putting in our kit bags. Now, the self-surgery scene. With a couple of noticeable exceptions, most depictions of self-surgery in the media are something you do not want to do in reality, especially without the overwatch of a trained medical professional. But considering the context of the episode, Belle knows she's got this tracker in her, and the immediacy to get it out is possibly the only justification for doing this at this stage. As someone who's performed some self-surgery on themselves, I know it can be quite a nerve-wracking experience. I was making ceramic arrowheads using ceramic plates, and one broke and got caught in my thumb. And I washed the wound, I disinfected it, I used tweezers and took all the parts out. But a week later, every time I bent my thumb, it was still really hurting. And the wound obviously started to heal after a week. So I'm looking at it and there's this bit of white in it. And I'm thinking, that's a piece of dead skin. But I go to scratch it with a pin and it makes a screeching noise. Not as in an alien or anything like that. The screech of the resistance of metal against porcelain. I had a porcelain splinter in my thumb that had over a week's worth of healing. It was almost closed over. So I had to use a scalpel and some tweezers to perform a bit of self-surgery on myself. And yeah, it's pretty nerve-wracking. If I hadn't caught that, if I hadn't got to that, you know, I could have possibly had something in my thumb that caused it to hurt every single time I bent the digit. But leaving foreign articles in bodies is actually relatively common, especially when it comes to military wounds. Sometimes the area that's damaged is actually so dangerous to actually go into for surgical precision, you leave it in there. There's stories of no end of veterans that have got bits of metal in them from unexploded bombs, from, you know, bullets that are still actually rattling around their bodies 60 years later because it wasn't safe to remove them. So take self-surgery depictions in the media with a grain of salt. Although it's useful that Belle shows she's got tweezers and a pocket knife to do it, and she has some disinfectant, it's really not something you want to do unless it's an absolute emergency, such as you've got a tracker in your leg and a murderous bipedal robot's coming after you. conclude talking about the self-surgery scene, I just want to ask the question of, Bella, why didn't you field dress your wound? I imagine she's probably going through shock after seeing two of her friends die, and also concussion from that really nasty head wound. But the fact she hasn't field dressed the wound means that the dog is still able to track her by following the blood trail, very similar to a modern day hunter and a deer. But as the onset of the episode goes on, I assume she starts suffering from an infection. We've already seen she's got no TCP, she can't disinfect the wound, and there's several scenes where she's clearly in pain and discomfort and her mobility starts to get affected because she's getting an infection in that wound. Lesson learned from? Properly field dress and look after your wounds. The scene where Bella goes to high ground to use her radio. That's quite an interesting survival lesson, but it's kind of a double-edged sword really. Although going to high ground does give you more transmission range and gives you more line of sight communication, because handheld radios are really badly affected by geographical terrain, she openly admits that the signal can be tracked and listened to. And after doing so, she doesn't use codes or abbreviations, the phonetic alphabet, or any kind of radio discipline. She just blabs on. Again, she's probably suffering from concussion and shock, but that's one of the factors that means the dog gets really hot on her tail, leading to her climbing the tree in the forest. And talking about climbing the tree, you know, Bella didn't know that the dog's leg is inoperable. She doesn't know the weapon that's contained in it is gone. By climbing that tree, she's effectively sealed her fate. She's cornered herself. It's only through dumb luck that the dog isn't able to pursue her.
Can't do it.
Your arm's fucked so you can't climb the tree.
And as Bella slumbers, she almost falls off the tree, awaiting the dog that's waiting at the bottom. Clearly, she didn't learn another lesson from Katniss Everdeen.
Welcome back. $1,999. 998. Did I miss something? How does Bella have this prior knowledge that awakening the dog after 1,000 seconds interrupts its battery backup or solar recharging or whatever's going on here, it's standby mode? That information is never addressed to the audience at all. If you know why that 1,000 seconds is important, you know, please let me know, because, you know, put it in the comments. But that's clearly some kind of prior knowledge that Bella has to consistently wake up the dog to the purpose of drain its battery. Yeah, it's a really good tactic, and we actually see her pull out those humbugs again. But where did the 1,000 seconds come from? How does it take more energy for the dog to wake from standby mode than it gains by going into standby mode? It's probably the bit of the episode that confuses me the most. After Bella successfully drains the dog's power through prior knowledge witchcraft of about 1,000 seconds, she actually manages to escape from it being hibernated beneath her and makes her way to what I will call the musician's compound. And from the brief glimpse we see of it from the outside, it's got sheer walls, and I really like how Bella gets access to that. We've already seen Clark with his glass hammer, we've seen Anthony with his crowbar. Well, Bella's got her own toolkit. First she gets over those sheer walls by using the intercom as a foothold and handhold. I just love the immediacy of that. She didn't have to try tunnelling under, she didn't have to try propping things against the wall as a handhold to get over, or even, you know, shimmy across a tree branch that overhangs the wall. It's just see the intercom, immediately go over it. I really, really like that. And then to get access to the keys to actually get into the building, she pulls out her own Hanoi fishing kit. Now, this is a method of entry kit used by criminals. It's real, it happens in reality, and it's actually used for getting keys, usually car keys, sometimes house keys, that are within reach of a letterbox. I assume Bella's is made out of an old radio antenna, and I would never considered putting one of these in my kit until I saw this depiction. I really like Bella's method of entry. If I'm going to take away anything from this episode, it's to consider putting a Hanoi kit as part of my method of entry and method of exit kit. And once Bella's got access to the building with her Hanoi fishing kit, I really like how she goes immediately scavenging. I love scavenging in media. I know it's all fake, I know everything in those drawers is planted by a stagehand and the prop master, but I really like that she's ostensibly looking for car keys, but she finds shotgun shells, and she pockets them knowing they might be useful. She doesn't even know there's a shotgun in the building yet, but I really like that depictions of scavenging exist, and it shows you items you could use. We get a bit of a glimpse that Metalhead might be a bit of a cozy apocalypse. What I mean by a cozy apocalypse is the nature of society has radically changed, but the things we take for granted necessarily haven't. Even if it's just located just in this musician's compound, there's still running water, there's still electricity. And it hasn't been such a period of time that cars can no longer run on fuel. Because given time, moisture from air vapour invades fuel and makes it not viable for combustion. And over time the fuel mixture changes so that the lighter hydrocarbons vanish and it no longer supports combustion. So fuel is still usable. So this is still a relatively recent apocalypse. Although we'll get a glimpse in the future episode Black Museum about the history of the robots, it's not really expanded upon. It's really more of an Easter egg. I find it interesting that now we're in this man-made environment, in this building, Bella's human senses start possibly tipping the scale the other way. It's because of her sense of smell that she's able to smell the two corpses, which nets her a nice shotgun pickup. And it's her sense of hearing, when she's using those scavenged medical supplies, that she picks up on the involuntary noises that the dog makes, alerting her to its presence. Now we get to my favourite lesson in the entire episode, where Bella shows us that any creature that relies on electronic surveillance to see is actually really vulnerable to paint. She also gets a super special survival mistakes gold star for not only visually impairing the dog, but then throwing in a sound distraction as well to distract it. I just love everything about this scene. It's amazing. Although we could argue, Bella, why aren't you pressing your advantage? You've got a shotgun, it's at the other side of the room distracted, but when we look at the context of this episode, only Anthony has been the only person to put up any kind of resistance against a dog. Everyone else seems primed in this apocalypse to flee. And that's probably a very instinctive feeling. So Bella's just using it as a distraction to get those car keys and get in that car. And this is where Bella's car-based look finally runs out. She goes to get into the vehicle to escape the dog, get back to her lover, get back to safety, and the car doesn't start. And worse yet, the music is blaring and the dog knows exactly where she is.
Now, I can't really fault Bella here. She's clearly doing kiting with this shotgun. What I mean by that, if you look where she fires her first shot, she's very close to the dog's head. In fact, the shotgun barrel is pointing right at it. When she's reloaded and about to fire a second shot, she's much closer to the rear of the vehicle. She's clearly moved backwards in the period it's taken her to reload. If she reloaded a bit quicker, maybe she wouldn't have got injured in the first place. Maybe that time to take a cartridge out of her pocket and reload meant the dog could close the ground and cause that injury with that nasty looking kitchen knife. But maybe there's a lesson there we can learn if we're going to drill really deeply into this one scene. And this is where we learn that the onboard complement of those tracker grenades wasn't single shot in the dog's arsenal either. Belle is absolutely peppered with those trackers. As she makes her way back into the house to perform more cell surgery on herself, taking one out of her face, she sees one next to her carotid artery. It's far too dangerous to attempt to remove. And this is where Belle's survival tale unfortunately ends. She didn't survive. She picks up the radio, she says her goodbyes, not knowing another human being will ever hear them.
Is there anyone there? If there is anyone there, this is just to say that I'm not coming back. I'm sorry I didn't get the replacement like I promised.
And as the camera pans out, she takes her own life. Her survival was probably never going to happen. Her death and taking her own life may have been inevitable. And as the camera takes us back to that initial warehouse, we get to our twist. We see what Anthony, Clark and Belle were willing to die for. And it's a teddy bear. 3 grown adults were prepared to risk their lives to bring momentary comfort to a presumably dying child. And I really like this ending. Originally the twist was going to be that the dog was controlled by a human, and it was almost like an analogy to military drones nowadays. That disconnect between killing someone with a tool that means you're so disconnected that you don't have any kind of moral effect. But I like this ending. I like the fact that 3 humans risked their life for a teddy bear. Because although our antagonist has been cold, calculating and artificial, our protagonists, to risk their lives for something of so little value, I think that's probably a very important lesson here, and the one I'm going to end this video on. They were willing to risk their lives for human nature. I just really like it. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed this episode on the lessons we can learn from Metalhead. If you liked this video, please consider liking it on YouTube. It lets me know I'm doing a good job. And if you really, really liked it, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you want to see what I'm up to in between videos, then I'm on Facebook. We've got a page called Survival Mistakes. And I'm also active on Twitter as @ZoeSurvival, where I usually post pictures and talk about stuff that I'm researching before filming videos. If you want to talk to me on Reddit, I've also set up a Survival Mistakes subreddit. And if you are any of my fans from Survival Mistakes Facebook, from Twitter, from Reddit, thank you so much. Your interactions mean the world to me. I read all your comments, and you really do make this really fun to do. So, as ever, there's only ever one way I can end a video, and that's for me to say to you, get out there and do the impossible every day.